Maya pressed her small body against the hospital's brick wall as rain started falling. Her mother, Elena, pulled their only jacket tighter around Maya's shoulders, leaving herself in just a thin sweater. They'd been sitting on this cold concrete for 3 hours, and the November chill was seeping into their bones. Elena stared at the emergency room entrance they'd been turned away from, replaying the conversation in her mind. No insurance meant no treatment for Maya's persistent fever that had climbed to 104 degrees that morning. The number glowed in her memory like a warning light she couldn't shut off. She'd watched the thermometer with growing panic at 4 a.m., then again at 6 a.m., then at 8 a.m. when she'd finally accepted they needed help. The clinic on 5th Street said to go to the ER. The ER registration desk said they needed to see a primary care doctor first for non-emergency cases. But primary care required insurance they couldn't afford on Elena's 2 cleaning jobs, which barely covered rent and food. The system was a maze with no exit, and somewhere in that maze, her daughter was burning up. "Mama, I'm sleepy," Maya whispered, her 6-year-old voice weak and raspy. Her usually bright brown eyes were glassy, unfocused. She'd stopped asking questions an hour ago, stopped squirming 20 minutes ago. That silence terrified Elena more than anything. "I know, baby. Just a little longer." Elena was lying, and she knew it. She had nowhere else to go. Their apartment was an hour away by bus, and she'd spent their last $7 on the fare here. She had 12 cents in her pocket and a maxed-out credit card in her wallet. Her phone battery was at 3%. She'd already called every free clinic in the county. All were closed or had month-long waiting lists. She looked down at Maya's flushed face. Her daughter had her father's nose, straight and delicate. Marco had left when Maya was 2, disappearing like morning fog, leaving behind only child support payments that stopped coming after 6 months. Elena had tried to find him, tried to get help from the state, but he'd moved out of state, and the system moved slowly while bills moved fast. A Blacktown car pulled up to the executive entrance 50 feet away. Elena watched it with dull eyes, too tired to feel envious anymore. A man in an expensive suit stepped out, charcoal grey with a crisp white shirt. His shoes probably cost more than her monthly rent. He moved with the confidence of someone who'd never been turned away from anything in his life. Then he stopped. He was staring directly at them. Elena looked away quickly, ashamed, expecting him to call security like the nurse had threatened to do if they didn't leave the property soon. She pulled Maya closer, preparing to stand, to walk, to do whatever she needed to do to protect her daughter from more rejection. But instead of walking away, his footsteps approached. She heard them clearly on the wet pavement, measured and deliberate. Then she felt him sit down on the cold concrete beside them, right there on the ground in his expensive suit. She could smell his cologne, something subtle and woody, so different from the antiseptic hospital smell that clung to everything. "I'm Richard Chen," he said quietly, his voice lacking the authority she expected. Instead, it was gentle, almost uncertain. "I run this hospital. Tell me what's happening." Elena's first instinct was disbelief. Hospital CEOs didn't sit on wet concrete with strangers. They didn't approach people who looked like her, disheveled, desperate, clearly poor. But when she finally looked at him, she saw something in his eyes that made her throat tighten. It wasn't pity. It was recognition, as if he'd been where she was once, or knew someone who had. Her voice cracked as she started explaining. The words tumbled out in a rush, about Maya's fever that wouldn't break, about the thermometer reading that kept climbing, about the clinic that sent them here, about the ER that turned them away. She told him about her cleaning jobs, about starting at 5 a.m. at the office building downtown and finishing at 9 p.m. at the restaurant across town. She told him about the insurance premium that cost more than her rent, about choosing between medicine and food, between electricity and doctor visits. "She's been sick for 3 days, Elena said, her hand trembling as she touched Maya's forehead. "It keeps getting worse. I gave her the last of the children's Tylenol this morning, but it's not helping anymore. I don't know what else to do. I don't know where else to go." Richard listened without interrupting, and Elena watched his jaw tighten with each detail she shared. His hands, she noticed, were clenched into fists on his knees. When she finally stopped talking, exhausted from confession, he sat in silence for a moment. The rain was falling harder now, and she realized he was getting completely soaked. His expensive suit was darkening with water, but he didn't seem to notice or care. "How long have you been sitting here?" he asked. 3 hours. Maybe more. I lost track." "And they just left you out here? In the rain? With a sick child?" Elena heard something dangerous in his voice now, a controlled anger that made her believe he really was who he said he was. "They said we could wait, but that without insurance would need to pay upfront for treatment. I have 12 cents. Richard stood abruptly, and for a second, Elena thought he was leaving, that this strange encounter was over, that she'd been foolish to hope. But then he extended his hand to her. "Come with me," he said. When Elena hesitated, staring at his outstretched hand like it might disappear, he added, "Please. I mean it. I'm taking you inside right now." Elena took his hand and let him help her up. She then scooped Maya into her arms, feeling how light her daughter had become over 3 days of barely eating. Maya's head lolled against her shoulder, and Elena felt fresh panic spike through her chest. Richard noticed. "How high did you say her fever was?" 104 this morning. I haven't checked since." His face went pale. "That's dangerous. That's very dangerous." He was already moving toward the executive entrance, holding the door open for them. "Follow me. Stay close." They entered a different world. The executive wing was quiet, carpeted, warm. So warm that Elena felt tears spring to her eyes just from the relief of heat. Richard moved fast, his wet shoes squeaking on the floor, past startled staff members who started to speak but fell silent at whatever expression they saw on his face. He led them through corridors Elena had never seen, past administrative offices and conference rooms, directly to an elevator marked staff only. Inside, he pressed the button for the pediatric wing and turned to Elena. "What's your daughter's name?" "Maya. Maya Elena Rodriguez." "Maya," Richard repeated softly, looking at the small girl in Elena's arms. "We are going to take care of you now. I promise." The elevator doors opened to the pediatric wing, and Richard stepped out like a man on a mission, with Elena following close behind, hardly daring to believe this was real. The pediatric wing erupted into controlled chaos the moment Richard Chen walked through those doors carrying a sick child's case like a battle standard. Elena watched nurses' heads snap up, doctors pause mid-stride, and a woman in navy scrubs practically run toward them. "Dr. Patel," Richard said, his voice calm but urgent. "This is Maya Rodriguez. 6 years old. Fever of 104 this morning, possibly higher now. Sick for 3 days. No treatment yet. I need her in a bed immediately." Dr. Patel didn't ask questions about insurance or paperwork. She simply nodded and gestured to an empty room. "Room 304. Let's go." Elena carried Maya inside, her arms shaking now from more than just exhaustion. The room was bright and warm, with cartoon animals painted on the walls. A real bed with clean white sheets. Medical equipment that hummed softly. Everything she'd needed 3 hours ago, right here, suddenly accessible because one man had chosen to sit down instead of walk away. "You can lay her down here," Dr. Patel said gently, pulling back the sheets. "What's her name, Mama?" "Maya," Elena whispered, carefully placing her daughter on the bed. Maya's eyes fluttered open briefly, confused by the new surroundings. "Hi Maya, I'm Dr. Patel. We are going to help you feel better, okay?" The doctor's hands were already moving, checking Maya's pulse, lifting her eyelids, pressing a thermometer into her ear. When it beeped, Dr. Patel's expression tightened. 105.2. "We need to bring this down now." The number hit Elena like a physical blow. It had climbed higher. While she'd been sitting outside in the rain, feeling helpless, her daughter's condition had been deteriorating. Is she going to be okay? The question came out as a sob. "We are going to do everything we can," Dr. Patel said, which wasn't quite the reassurance Elena needed but was honest, and she appreciated honesty. "I need to examine her. Can you tell me about her symptoms?" Elena recited them again. The fever, the sore throat Maya had mentioned yesterday, the way she'd stopped eating, the fatigue. Richard stood by the door, still in his soaking wetsuit, listening intently as if memorizing every word. Within minutes, more staff arrived. A nurse started in full line while Elena held Maya's other hand, whispering reassurances as her daughter whimpered. Another nurse brought cooling blankets. Dr. Patel examined Maya's throat and immediately called for a rapid strep test. "Her throat is extremely inflamed," the doctor explained. "I'm seeing white patches on her tonsils. This looks like severe strep throat, but I need the test to confirm before starting antibiotics." "Strep," Elena repeated. Something so common, so treatable, had nearly become a crisis because she couldn't afford to walk through a door. "If untreated, it can lead to serious complications," Dr. Patel said carefully. "Rheumatic fever, which can damage the heart. Kidney problems. You did the right thing bringing her in." Except she hadn't brought her in. She'd been turned away. Elena glanced at Richard, who was now speaking quietly with a hospital administrator who'd appeared with a clipboard. The administrator looked nervous, kept nodding, kept scribbling notes. The rapid strep test came back positive in 10 minutes. Dr. Patel immediately ordered 4 antibiotics, anti-inflammatories, and continued fever management. Elena watched the clear liquid drip from the 4-bag into the tube that led to her daughter's small arm, and she finally let herself cry. Not from despair anymore, but from overwhelming relief. Richard dismissed the administrator and approached the bed. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the chair beside Elena. She nodded, and he sat down, this powerful man in his ruined suit, watching the medical staff work with an expression Elena couldn't quite read. It looked like anger mixed with something else. Guilt, maybe. Or determination. "This shouldn't have happened," he said quietly, not looking at her but at Maya. "Not at my hospital. Not anywhere." Elena wiped her eyes. "You can't fix the whole system. It's too big, too broken." "No," Richard agreed. "But I can fix this. I can fix what happens here, in this building, under my authority." He pulled out his phone, checked the time, 7:47 p.m., and started typing. "I'm calling an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. And I'm starting a fund tonight. For people like you who fall through the cracks." A fund? Elena wasn't sure she understood. Her brain felt foggy from stress and exhaustion. An emergency care fund. Anyone who walks through those doors needing immediate medical attention gets it. No questions about insurance first. No one sits outside in the rain. His voice was fierce now. "We figure out payment later. We set up plans. We find resources. But treatment comes first. Always." "That will cost millions," Elena said, though she barely understood hospital finances. "Then it costs millions." Richard looked at her directly for the first time since they'd entered the room. "Do you know why I was here tonight? I was coming from a meeting with investors about expanding our cosmetic surgery wing. Elective procedures. Profitable procedures. I was going to approve a $3 million renovation for a service that's entirely optional while people like you and Maya sit outside because you can't pay." His phone buzzed repeatedly. He ignored it. "I started in this business because I wanted to help people," he continued. "My mother was a nurse. She worked in emergency rooms for 30 years. She used to come home and cry about the people she had to turn away, about the system that made her choose between policy and compassion. She died 2 years ago, and somewhere along the way, I forgot why she did this work. I forgot why I do this work." 3 hours passed like minutes. Maya's fever slowly dropped, 104.8, then 104.2, then 103.7. Elena watched the numbers fall with the same intensity she'd watched them rise that morning. Dr. Patel checked in every 30 minutes, adjusting medications, reassessing symptoms, offering Elena reassurances that grew more confident with each visit. Richard stayed. He cancelled his dinner meeting with a brief text. He cancelled tomorrow morning's golf game with another. When a board member called demanding to know why he was summoning an emergency meeting, he stepped into the hallway and Elena heard his voice through the door, steady and unyielding. "Because we are failing our fundamental mission, and it stops now." Around 10 p.m., Maya's fever broke. It dropped to 101.2, then to 100.4. Color returned to her cheeks. Her eyes opened and stayed open, focusing on her mother's face. "Mama." Her voice was raspy but stronger. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here." Elena kissed her forehead, feeling the reduced heat with overwhelming gratitude. Dr. Patel smiled. "The antibiotics are working. She'll need to stay on them for 10 days, and I want to keep her overnight for observation, but she's going to be fine." Fine. Such a simple word for such a miraculous outcome. Richard stood, and Elena noticed his suit had dried into wrinkled chaos. He looked nothing like the polished executive who'd stepped out of that town car hours ago. He looked tired and human and real. "I need to go make some calls," he said. "But I'm not leaving the hospital. If you need anything at all, tell the nurses to page me." He pulled out his wallet and handed Elena a business card with his direct number. "And this is for after. For Maya's follow-up care, for anything else you need. You call me, understand?" Elena took the card with shaking hands. "I don't know how to thank you." "Take care of your daughter. That's thanks enough." Richard paused at the door. "And Elena, what happened tonight? You being turned away? I'm making sure it never happens again. Not to anyone." He left, and Elena heard him in the hallway already on his phone. I need the hospital attorney, the CFO, and the head of emergency services on a conference call in 15 minutes. Yes, tonight. This can't wait. Maya squeezed her mother's hand. Who was that man? Someone who remembered why kindness matters, Elena whispered, pulling the blanket up to Maya's chin. 2 months later, the Chen Emergency Care Fund officially opened with a $5 million initial investment from Richard personally and matching funds from the hospital foundation. It provided immediate treatment regardless of insurance status, with a team of financial counselors who worked to find longer-term coverage solutions afterward. The program became a model that 17 other hospitals adopted within the year. Richard never told the press about the rainy night that inspired it, never mentioned Elena or Maya by name. But Elena knew. Every time she passed that hospital, which she did often, because Maya's follow-up care was excellent and free, she remembered the CEO who sat down on wet concrete instead of walking away. She remembered that sometimes the system doesn't change because of policy or law, but because one person decides that compassion matters more than convenience. And she taught Maya that lesson too, that kindness isn't about grand gestures or perfect solutions. Sometimes it's just about sitting down beside someone in the rain and asking what's wrong. Sometimes that's enough to change everything.